It's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, this is Ivy Slater. Welcome to today's episode of Her Success Story. For those of you who are just tuning in, welcome. We're doing something we've never done before. We're doing a series all around legal. Not necessarily with law firms. We're doing it with all the organizations and companies and resources that support the legal industry. Now, we could be doing this all year long, but we're just doing a small series here with some key resources. For those of you who are regular listeners, if you're saying, oh, I'm not in the legal space, well, guess what? This is rinse and repeatable in every space. The information we're gathering is going to work for your space. So I'm going to jump in with our next guest, Erin Andersen, the CEO and founder of Your Brand Networker. One of the things I admire and adore about Erin is her passion and commitment for hiring for small nationwide law firms. So it's law firms anywhere in this country that are looking to hire great staff with a strong emphasis in culture. And Erin has a little twist that I really admire. It's a flat fee. So you're not locked into percentages. It's a whole differentiator for law firms to have as a resource. So Erin, thanks for joining me here today on Her Success Story.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So how did you get started in this space? Like what caused you, you've been in business for like 5 years or so. What caused you to drive to be hiring for flat fees, and what drove to the interest in law?
Yeah, so I originally started off in the architecture and interior design space by people that were simply requesting it. So, having started my business on the career transition side, a lot of people knew that I was familiar with hiring models and the hiring market in general, which
Okay.
led to them asking, what would it be like if you were to hire for us? You know LinkedIn well, you know the LinkedIn algorithm. And so, I very loosely started hiring just by request to see if it was something that I would like, and then watched results. And as I continued to do that, I realized that I really enjoyed the hiring piece, but my passion wasn't necessarily behind architecture, interior design, and
Okay.
that type of firm. Which is when I was networking a lot with small legal firms in New York City, such as organizations like Women of Law that we're both in. And that's when I started to meet different small law firms around New York and New Jersey and working with them on their LinkedIn needs. Organically, they started to actually request as well and inquire about LinkedIn hiring. And that's how I started to pivot into legal, and then really specifically concentrate in the hiring space.
It's so interesting. So many people, we have concepts. I know myself when I started Slater Success, I had a concept of who I thought my clients were, where I was going to go for business. And then when I listened to what the marketplace was asking of me and started showing up for who was asking, my whole business transformed. What did you find for you? It's not a direction I thought we were going to go today, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Sure, in terms of kind of the evolution of it.
Yeah, exactly.
I find if you're going to be in the hiring market space, you do need to be really specific. And in between interior design, architecture, and legal, I did a little bit of accounting, and I will still do that on occasion. But I think more than anything, maybe it's understanding the industry, but it's also being able to work really well with the personality of the firms that you're working with. And I think that's the most important. It's not that I didn't enjoy architecture and interior design. It's interesting, but that's not my background. And neither is legal, but my background is actually in financial services and banking. And for me, that seemed fairly parallel with the personalities and the structure of the firms that I was working with. Over time,
That actually makes sense because you have, a certain type of MO with the person. And
yeah,
legal
100%.
legal recruiting is a massive industry you stepped into.
Yeah, and finding, do you want to do support staff? Do you want to do associates? Do you want to do partners? Do you want to do everything as kind of the next stage as it continues? And then eventually it might even be areas of law. But for now, I'm concentrating on support staff and associates in most areas of law, I should say, within the small law firm space.
As we've gotten to know each other through various organizations and become colleagues over the years, I truly have admired you for your passion around making sure a culture is the right fit and what you do is pre-hiring and making sure, like, it's interesting in all the firms I've worked with, different firms have different cultures. They have different rhythms, different types of people. And you have always been so passionate about this. Share a little bit. First of all, what drove that passion? Like, where did this come from? Not everybody says, oh, I'm not just going to hire, but I'm going to really dive into the culture of a firm.
Yeah, so initially getting into the hiring space in conjunction with culture, what really drove me into it is my own experience with recruiters. And I'm sure yourself and everyone who's listening probably has somewhat of a negative connotation with it, even themselves, if they are a recruiter, because most of them say that too. And so I've been on both sides, as I'm sure many people listening have, where you've worked in a corporate role and you've worked with a recruiter to either get that position, or maybe they've just submerged your inbox with messages. And maybe you've worked with a recruiter on the other side where they've simply just thrown resumes and charged you an extravagant fee and maybe even went against contract terms. And so you have a bad taste in your mouth. Where I had both of those. I hadn't used a recruiter to hire for my business, but I was working alongside them with clients. And then from my own perspective, I had worked with recruiters myself and had a really negative experience because I didn't really feel that they were necessarily on my side or advocating for me. And so that's really how I got into the hiring space. And then with the culture piece, I was into toxic workplace cultures myself. And so it was always a goal of mine to get certified in workplace culture. And then once I did, I wanted to figure out how to differentiate myself in the recruiting space by consulting on, where hiring meets culture to make sure we're not looking at just a technical fit, but is this going to be a cultural fit for long-term retention?
I think that's the key is the long-term retention. You can put somebody in a position and the job is the right fit, the salary is the right fit, the area of law is the right fit. But if the people aren't the right fit, the investment on board is significant.
Mhm.
It can be a good portion of somebody's salary for the first year.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about a recruiter fee. I'm talking about the company's onboarding and truly them learning the cases, learning their clientele, learning how the organization works. It's a time investment, and time is money, bottom line. So that piece about culture of actually putting people together that people feel right, that you are in with and I'm kind of putting quotes around it, your kind of people
Mhm.
is significant. What are the results you see because of that? Like, is there anything you have tracked or seen or noticed with clients, repeat clients? What do you see because of this?
Yeah, because it's not rushed and I'm interviewing the candidates as well. So making sure there's enough interviews where multiple people at the firm and myself are interviewing them so that they're getting both parties are getting an opportunity to see people from different perspectives, typically is leading to long-term retention. And we're asking the right questions. Often a typical recruiter would just pass off a candidate to a firm without actually getting to know them themselves. And so then they'd be missing out on maybe certain questions that could be asked around not just advertising, hey, here's our culture, but I always ask a candidate, what is the culture that you're looking for? Or I don't ask a candidate, why is it that you're leaving a job? I typically reflect on, is there something right now in your current culture that you feel like you are, not do you feel like you don't really have access to promotion or that you're not supported or maybe that you're not even rewarded in general? So I make sure that there's something unique about that firm's culture before I even take them on as a client.
Let's talk about a little bit because it's her success story. We always talk about scaling our own businesses a little bit. What have you learned in the years as a business owner? What has been your knowledge base? You stepped into this, like many of us, with like a lot of guts and saying, "Okay, we got to figure it out."
Hmm. Just in general about business. Um,
Absolutely. As far as leading and running a business, what has been some of your learning lessons there?
My feeling is number one, that it really took to year 4 and 5 for security and to know it's going to work long term. I think you can always be positive and know that. But I really felt a shift in year 5 specifically, but 4 leading into it. So when I hear people ask me questions that are just starting or they're year 2 and 3 and they're starting to dip and they don't know what's happening, I'm not going to say everyone's at that point, but I think that's the point where, and even according to statistics, that it does start to feel more secure. The second thing is how you can build a business to really support your needs and wants. So you have so much more control than having a set paycheck. And a lot of people like that security, but a lot of people also want certain things in life and they want the flexibility that goes along with it. So there are numerous things that have happened over 5 years. It's been really encouraging from a planning perspective to know that, if I need to go to an extra networking event or an extra conference that year, or if I'm taking multiple vacations, knowing how to go to the right business development events or take the right action to be able to plan and feel like I have control somewhat of, the income coming in and the business that's being generated. And third, I think the entrepreneurship journey really forces you to do a lot of work on yourself and explore things that you probably wouldn't have otherwise.
One of the greatest comments is, entrepreneurship is a fast-paced course in personal development, and that's on a good day,
Mhm.
let alone
Mhm.
navigating life as sometimes it runs in ebbs and flows. In working with law firms, what do you see as far as recruiting that you can pass forward to leaders? What can they be aware of? Is it when they should hire? How long a hire takes? It's always like I have this thought of like Monday morning quarterback. I wish we should have done this.
Yeah, the strategy and timing. So every year at some point, I'm sure most people listening take time to strategize. And so even if in Q1 and Q2, hiring isn't on the agenda necessarily per se, but maybe it is in the plans for that year, you should actually be strategizing on that and collecting, whoever it is that you hire to hire for you, checking salary market comps. What do I need to budget for? What do I need to expect? I have so many emails in my inbox. In fact, every single day, not just week, every day saying, oh my God, I wish I did this sooner. Or I need to hire right now. I have people contact me 30, 60, 90 days in advance. And then they're like, I'm going to hold off. And through that period of holding off, something falls through. An associate leaves, support staff that's been with them for 20 years leaves, and now they're left feeling very stuck. And so, the first thing I would say is when you're doing your strategy every year, hiring needs to be a part of it. Even if it's 2 years out, figure out how much you need to budget and plan for these roles. I think that's the most important. The second is know that it takes time. I definitely escalate the process by making sure that it's done at a time in a timely manner because I only work with so many firms at a time. So I book them out in advance. That being said, despite how many requirements are needed for that role will really dictate how long it takes. Or I have a firm right now, we have a lot of people who are checking the boxes for being a good technical fit, but some of the personalities are just not right. And we're finding that out through interviews. So even though it could be a super easy position or very entry level, if it's a small firm, we can't just hire anybody. We don't want to hire someone that's only going to last a year. So I would say that's the other thing is don't think that the entry level position is going to always be faster than say the senior trial attorney.
It's interesting. Yes, I know when we do strategic planning on a regular basis for law firms and other companies, and we always look at team. We always look at, and I can't make this stuff up. This happened with a client yesterday. We had talked about, their growth path for 2025 into 2026, and if you're not looking at the growth path with the team that's going to grow with it, then something's going to get left behind the eight ball, so to speak, and fall through the cracks or add stress to the leadership, which we never like to see because it's nothing worse than growing a firm under stress and pressure. You should
Yeah.
really, we can grow a firm with joy and resilience and smart moves versus just, drudgery. You have to look at your hiring, because if you're looking to grow, you need your people in place to grow with you, and you need them trained up, is my thing. Is I want
Yes.
people trained up, ready to jump in, not, oh, we should have had this 30, 60, 90 days ago.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean the training is key. I think something I see, or I know I see a lot, is a firm will come to me. This happened this summer, and they'll tell me they need multiple roles at once. And then that's really a whole consulting session on which roles do we need at which time, what is most important. And then I ask further questions on, well, why is this most important? What is making you say that you need this, right? If we hire this attorney that is very senior level, but we don't have the support staff once they're onboarded, how is that ever going to work, right? If they're bringing in new business and they have a book, well, then we have to have the support staff in place to be able to support them. So it's not, even if I can hire everybody at once, it doesn't mean that we do so. And so what firms learn through that process is that once I hire the first position, they're like, oh, right, it's going to take a couple weeks to onboard and to train. And now we can hire the next position. So it's not just the strategy on what is the role, what is the title, how much is the salary associated with this. It's what order are we going to hire in, and how much does each role take to train.
What has surprised you in leading this company and in everything that you've done in the last whole bunch of years?
Probably timing, like just timing on feeling security and feeling like, oh my goodness, taxes, right? Like things that I saw.
Surprise, surprise.
Write a reel on something yesterday where a coach was talking about, they were kind of quoting other business owners
Yeah.
that say something along the lines of, oh my goodness, you're leaving and there's taxes. And it was really interesting to me because it made me think back to like how many years I have thought the same thing, where you have a lot of things that you don't think about when you're starting a business. I think with a brick and mortar, it takes a lot more planning initially and a lot more investment. So just diving into the online business space, you're like, oh, well, I already have my laptop. I can do this, and that. And it is actually quite easy to set things up. But then thinking about, okay, I have to support myself with benefits and taxes. And even if you have the right people in place to support you on all those things, I think it takes a long time to feel comfortable, and then to find the right people, and then maybe add people on. Like I'm looking at adding a tax strategist in addition to my CPA now, and figuring out what is the best for you and what's going to make you feel really aligned with all those decisions. I think what surprises me specifically in what it is that I do is how often people have had bad experiences with typical recruiters doesn't totally surprise me. I think it more surprises me the situations that they've caught themselves in or found themselves in terms of how much was spent on a recruiter and there was an issue with the contract. And so then they were stuck in it, and how fast this person left. Or, recruiters typically don't even conduct first round interviews. So there's all these things that were missed with like a $40,000 fee. So I'm always surprised to hear at the output of an investment with little in return.
What is one tip or piece of advice that you would share forward for, let's be specific here, for law firms in their hiring strategy?
Yeah. In terms of what I'm surprised in their hiring strategy before they come to me.
No, nope, a tip or a piece of advice
Oh,
for
sorry.
firms in their hiring strategy.
I already mentioned timing, so I want to think of something unique. I would say
Timing is important, and
timing is important. I've covered it a lot though.
right. And well, why you think, I'm just going to say, from when we're working with firms, always be planning a quarter ahead.
Yeah.
So if you think you're going to be hiring for Q3, be working on it in Q2. So you find the right fit for your firm, your company. I'll share a story. A few years ago, a client of mine, we suggested in kind of the end of Q3 to hire. And they're like, no, 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 we're not ready yet. We're not ready yet. We're not ready yet. And unfortunately, by the time they got ready, they're like, oh my God, we should have done this like months and months and months ago. So it's always like when that inkling comes up, it's an inkling for a reason. At least go out and explore it. Have the conversations, build the resources. What's your tip?
Yeah, so I thought of something pretty unique. So I was going to mention something culture, but I feel like we've covered that as well. And those are all important things. But I would challenge everyone to look further into a resume and have a conversation versus just vetting through resumes that maybe have a few short dates. I'll give it a few examples. Number one, with a resume, they could, a lot of people say, well, this person's jumping. First, like look into where the dates are, right? We had this thing called COVID. And so there's a lot of layoffs between 2020 and 2022. The second thing is a lot of candidates, and I also write resumes, so I know this, and it's something that I always put into my resumes so that it's very clear to a typical recruiter that doesn't want to strike up a conversation or the owner of a firm. If you were laid off, like, a candidate doesn't always know to put that on a resume. And so, unfortunately, I've seen candidates that I have decided to interview. They've had two back-to-back layoffs, and they were kind of just dealt a bad hand the last few years. The third thing could be because we've mentioned culture, and the last thing is maybe it was a bad cultural fit. And so I would challenge firm owners to think back to a time that, maybe it wasn't a good cultural fit, or maybe they weren't given access, or maybe there's no partnership track. Or, like I've heard recently on several interviews, the candidates were promised one thing and they were not given it in the role. And so now they found themselves where they felt stunted, especially at the beginning of their career, where they could have been advancing. So that would be my biggest tip right now, because I find most firms, unless I have the conversation, they aren't willing, which is fine because I am that first stage. But I always ask, can I
I was
please
going to
interview
say, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I admire about the way you run your business is you do the first round interviews before you bother the partners, the owners, the founders, the CEOs, however way you want to look at it, to vet really what quality is. And so the time of the partner is valued, and they're
Yeah.
actually pulling time from a purpose and a reason because it's already been vetted. It's already a fair, good resource based on their culture. And that's one of the things I admire. One of the reasons I asked you to be on Her Success Stories, first legal resource. So thank you, Erin.
Yeah. Yeah. I would just say with that too, depending on the role, I think in certain roles it can happen a little bit more often. But by me conducting the first round interview, obviously I vet further. But often candidates don't show up to an interview sometimes. And of course, there's certain situations where they could have had an emergency or something happened. And depending on the situation, they can get a second chance. But think about an attorney who's running a firm and they have a million things going on and they've blocked this time off in their calendar. And it could be really frustrating and a time suck versus I'm working on that firsthand and following up to see what had happened and if we need to reschedule, but it doesn't fall on the firm.
I love that. Erin Andersen, thanks for joining me today on Her Success Story.
Thanks so much for having me.
Listeners, the old listeners who've been with us for a while, you know this. For the new joining us, this is the point in the show that we say, take a breath, take a deep breath, take a moment, take a deep breath in. Identify one thing you're taking away from the conversation Erin and I had today. Just one. Think about it. It's that aha, a takeaway, and make a decision on the action you're going to take based on that piece of information. We love our listeners, and we encourage people to not just take in information, but take the information that's important and take the actions for your firms, your companies, your growth. Stay tuned for more great interviews from everything from marketing to AI to hiring. We have it covered in this legal resource series. And let me know what you think. What has been most helpful? Who have you enjoyed listening to? Easily accessed on LinkedIn or directly through slatersuccess.com. See you next time.